I'd like to speak not to the travel professional in you all, but to the traveler itself. Because I think we can't transmit something that we don't have in any regard. And I think travel, if it's ultimately about connection, we need to connect with the people that we're dealing with, on whether it's writing about it or in any regard. And I think too often we speak at something instead of trying to make that connection. My brother, wonderful guy, Pete, wonderful guy, very outgoing, very gregarious. Everybody loves him. Not the most self-reflective guy in the world. He recently called me and said, by his own admission, he called me and said, "Listen, Andy, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to become a therapist." Wow, Pete, great. You ever been in therapy? No. I don't need therapy. And I congratulated him and said, "Okay, good luck. That sounds great." But I hung up and I wondered how he could do that if he'd never had any experiential knowledge of it. No matter how many pamphlets and books and seminars and things he attended, how can one sort of really communicate and identify unless we've actually experienced that? And so I'll report back to you on how he does. But you know, in my industry, the travel part of my industry, and perhaps in yours, I hear a lot of talk about the difference between tourists and travelers. There's this big kind of snobbery about I'm sure you have people calling you up and going, "Now, my husband and I, we want an immersive experience, we want an authentic experience," and all these great buzzwords that we all bandy around and us travel writers throw out all the time. And there's a great snobbery among travel writers, certainly, that, you know, we are travelers, we are not tourists, we don't do that kind of thing. And you know, the great travel writer and one of my personal travel heroes, Paul Theroux, has a fairly famous line that says, "Tourists don't know where they're going, travelers don't know where they've been." And I thought that was really deep and interesting. I'm not really sure what it means, but I think, for me, the difference between a tourist and a traveler is absolutely nothing. I think that anybody that gets up off their couch and is willing to go to the airport and fight through the bad theater that is the TSA and get on a plane and endure the adversarial relationship that we now have with the people who work on the planes and go anywhere that they don't have to go has my undying admiration. And so I think that this sort of travel snobbery and these kind of labels we put on it are unfortunate. But what I do think there's a difference is between vacationing and travel. Now, I love a good vacation. I lived in Hawaii for 10 years, but I'm not particularly good at a vacation. You know, I get my iced tea and my book, and I'm all lathered up, and I got my protective visor on, and I scooch into the sand, and I'm all comfy. What am I going to do the other 6.5 days of my vacation? You know, I come back, and in 2 days, I'm stressed out again. You know, but when I go, if I'm in Rome, say, and I'm with you, and we're struggling around, we've got our map, and we're looking for that damn Trevi fountain, and it's hot, and the sun is beating down, and these people are trying to sell me trinkets, and it's hassling. Why can't this thing be written in English? I don't know where I'm going. And suddenly I turn the corner, and oh my God, there it is. And I have that moment of like, and I turn to you and go, look at that. And we share that moment that happens between us when we both gasp and look at each other. That goes very deep. I can dine out with you on that for years, that instant that happens. Because what I think happens in that instant is we stop being our disappointed, tired, jaded, bitter old selves and are once again filled with wonder and openness and joy at being alive and joy at being who we are and all those kind of things. Everything falls away and just the us of us comes out in that aha instant. And I think those are invaluable. And I think that they change us, those moments. There's a line of poetry that I like. Don't worry, I don't read a lot of poetry. But I read recently, and it said, "We see things only once as children. The rest is memory." And I thought, that's a very beautiful line. It's very poignant, it's a little sad, and I guess it's kind of true. Except, I would add, where travel comes in. Because that aha moment, that thing that we share in that instant, returns us again to our innocence and our vulnerability and our wide openness to the world and why we had such hope when we were young. And I think that's a huge, huge thing. And I don't think that it necessarily has to happen far from home. You know, I was writing for a magazine, and I live in New York for 35 years now, and the magazine asked me to write about New York, and I went, oh no. I don't know anything. I couldn't write about New York. I live there. I don't even see it anymore. And so it's much easier to go somewhere, you know, that you don't know or very exotic to write about. It's just easier, you know, especially if there's deserts and camels. My God, 90% of the story is written. But so I went, okay, how do I find a way to sort of have fresh eyes again? And so I wrote about 42nd Street. And then they said, well, you're an actor, and in this day and age, we need some video content, so make us a little video about 42nd Street. And so I did. And so, because I see some eyes glazing over here, I'll show you a little video for like 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and chat some more. Behind me is 42nd Street. It runs from the East River all the way to the Hudson, across Manhattan. We're going to walk this street from one end to the other and see as much as we can. I'm Andrew McCarthy. This is my neighborhood. Let's go see it. The world convenes at the United Nations, just above the east end of 42nd Street. Like, really? Ah, welcome. Más espacio, por favor. Gracias. I love New York. You always know the out-of-towners. They're the ones waiting on the curb. The New Yorkers are in the street. The Chrysler Building is my favorite building in New York. Just west is the most famous train station in the country. 750,000 people pass through Grand Central every day. But there's more to this place than just trains. Let's eat. I'll take another. A short walk away, things are a lot quieter. Great place to spend the afternoon. The library also happens to have a beautiful backyard. I love Bryant Park. It has the most European feel of any park in town. Just one block west of this oasis is the most chaotic corner in the country. Times Square, crossroads of the world. Mayor might close this part of Broadway off to pedestrian traffic only. Best idea he ever had. No part of 42nd Street has changed more than this block between 7th and 8th. It used to be all drugs and prostitution. Now it's Disney. I'll get the whole background. I got it. How's that look?
Can you get more of the background, please?
More background, right. This far west section of 42nd Street isn't so much a neighborhood being rebuilt as one that's being born. A lot of rats down there?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, you're a better man than me.
It's a living.
Yeah, huh? Here's the end of the line. 42nd and 12th is the Hudson River, the Circle Line, the Intrepid. It's New Jersey beyond that. Nice walk. You know what's interesting about that is that I was in, oh, don't do that. Sure, you show them some TV and they clap, yeah. I remember that day, I was really stressed out in the morning when we were starting, and by the end I was wide open and I felt great. You know, I felt like, my wife is Irish, she has all those wonderful sayings occasionally come out of her mouth, and she says, I feel like myself from the toes up. And that's how I felt at the end of that walk, when I sort of experienced New York, not as a sort of local, but as with the wonder of like, wow, in 30 years I'd never talked to a Con Ed guy before, you know? And he was like, why are you talking to me? And by the end he's smiling and tipping his hat. You know, and it's that connection, I think, that is so important. I want to put in a word for solo travel. I'm a big believer in solo travel. How many solo travelers out here? That's not bad, not great. But I think that anybody who's traveled alone, I think it's indispensable. I think everyone should do it at least once. And I think any one of the people that put up their hand can remember that trip much more than they can remember many of the other ones. And I think that people don't travel alone for two reasons. One is fear of physical safety, and the other is fear of loneliness. And I think both those reasons are absolute bunk. I think I'm no one to tell a woman where they're going to go and feel safe in the world. That's, how would I know? And that's, of course, up to any individual. But I would dare say that a woman is just as safe walking down the streets of Paris or Rome, although you might not be alone very long in Rome, as New York and in your hometown. So I think there are many places in the world where we can go and experience on our own, and I think we try and insulate ourselves. Often when I travel with someone, I'm having the shared experience, which is very nice and can be wonderful, but there's something very different about experiencing yourself in place. It's very transforming, I think, and I think the other reason people don't do it is fear of loneliness, and I think that's unfortunate, because lonely is something we are quite a lot, and alone is something we are quite a lot, and I think we need to learn to come to terms with who we are in that space. It was through travel that I sort of stopped being afraid of loneliness and came to realize that I was pretty good company for myself. You know, we make a lot of decisions sometimes based on fear of being alone, and so we just go grasping around at certain situations that maybe we shouldn't, just so we don't have to be alone in that. And I think I found when I travel alone, the world has a way of coming up underneath me and supporting me in a really big way. Anyway, that's my stump for solo travel. I have a friend